President Ibrahim Traoré was having a normal day, or so it seemed. He had planned a surprise visit to a poor neighborhood in the capital city of Burkina Faso. He wanted to see with his own eyes how government aid was reaching the people. There were no TV cameras or journalists with him. He wanted this to be real. As the black presidential motorcade moved slowly through the busy streets, filled with market stalls, dusty roads, and people walking in every direction, Traoré sat quietly, inside his vehicle looking out the window. He was thinking deeply about the suffering many of his citizens still faced. Suddenly, something caught his eye. His car passed a group of beggars sitting on the sidewalk. One of them looked strangely familiar. Traoré's eyes narrowed, told the driver to stop the car immediately. The bodyguards looked confused, but followed his order. The door opened, and the president stepped out, walking straight toward the group. The people nearby started murmuring, unsure of what was happening. The beggars looked up in shock as the most powerful man in the country walked toward them. One man, sitting quietly with his head bowed and a tin can in front of him, didn't even notice until Traoré stood just inches away. "Adama," President whispered, his voice breaking. The beggar slowly looked up. His eyes were sunken, his face dirty, and his clothes torn. But his eyes, those same brown eyes, were unmistakable. It was him, Adama, his childhood best friend. The two had grown up together, laughed together, studied together. In fact, they used to share everything in school, books, secrets, even dreams. But now, here he was, sitting on the street, begging strangers for coins to survive. For a moment, the president stood frozen. His guards stood behind him, tense and unsure what to do. People began gathering, pulling out phones to record the strange scene. President Traoré didn't care. His heart was too heavy. Slowly knelt down on one knee in front of Adama. "It's me, Ibrahim," he said softly. Adama looked again. His eyes widened, his lips trembled, and then his head dropped in shame. He tried to turn away, but Traoré gently held his shoulder. "What happened, brother?" he asked, already feeling tears fill his eyes. Adama didn't answer. He just shook his head and started to cry. The moment was painful and raw. This wasn't a planned photo moment. This wasn't politics. This was personal. This was heartbreak. President Traoré couldn't hold back the tears. They rolled down his face as he hugged his old friend. Cameras caught the moment, but it didn't matter. This was not for the world. This was for two boys who had once promised each other they would rise together. Somewhere along the way, life had separated them. Ibrahim had gone to military school, then politics. Adama had faced tragedy and loss. After his parents died in a village attack during the Civil War, he had no one, no money, no help. He dropped out of school, wandered from town to town, and ended up begging in the streets of the capital, lost and forgotten. As President Traoré held him, people around watched in complete silence. Some were crying too. A woman in the crowd whispered, "This is the kind of president we need. One who remembers the people." Others began clapping slowly. The clap grew louder as more people realized what was happening. It wasn't just about two friends. It was about pain, about loyalty, about the human side of leadership. The president stood up, wiping his eyes, and gave a command to his security. "Bring him with us. Give him food. Give him a place to stay. I want him safe." Adama up gently. He was still crying, still shaking. But for the first time in years, there was hope in his eyes. Had been seen. He had not been forgotten. The motorcade, now with an extra passenger, continued its journey. But everything had changed. For President Traoré, that day was no longer about reports or meetings. It was about remembering where he came from. It was about a promise he had once made to a friend, and maybe, just maybe, now he could fulfill it. As they drove off, Traoré looked at Adama, sitting beside him, and said, "I'm sorry it took me so long to find you, but I won't leave you again." And with that, a new chapter in both their lives began, one built not just on power or politics, but on true friendship, tears, and second chances. Adama sat on the edge of the soft hospital bed, his eyes still, read from crying, It had been just a few hours since he was found on the street by President Ibrahim Traoré. Everything felt like a dream. One moment, he was begging for coins, ignored by everyone. The next, the president himself was hugging him, calling him brother, and crying with him in front of the whole crowd. Now, he was wearing clean clothes, had eaten a full meal, and was resting in a private room in a hospital. But inside, Adama still felt broken. He remembered how bright his future once looked. Years ago, he was one of the smartest boys in his school. Teachers used to praise him. He loved reading, solving math problems, and dreaming about becoming a doctor. But everything changed when war reached his village. His parents were killed in a sudden attack. He was just 14. With no family left, Adama tried to survive by himself. He left his village and went to the city. He hoped life would be better there, but it wasn't. He couldn't afford food or school fees. No one offered help. Slowly, he lost hope. Years passed, started begging. It was the only way to eat. President Traoré sat in the chair beside him, holding his friend's hand. The powerful leader looked at Adama with tears in his eyes, not as a president, but as a friend who felt guilty. "Adama," he said softly, "do you remember our school days?" Adama looked at him and gave a weak smile. "How can I forget? You used to sneak bread from your lunch and share it with me." They both laughed a little. The pain was still there, but the memory warmed their hearts. "You always protected me," Ibrahim continued. "When the older boys tried to bully me, you stood up, even when it meant getting punished yourself." Adama nodded slowly. "You were like my brother," he said. "We had nothing, but we had dreams." Then he lowered his head. "You followed your dream, became something. Look at me now." President Traoré held his friend's hand tighter. "Adama," he said, "you are not a failure. Life was unfair to you. But I promise that ends today." A nurse walked in and offered water and some medicine. President Traoré stood up and asked her to give them a few minutes. Backed down and looked Adama in the eyes. "Let me tell you something," he said firmly. "Do you know why I became a soldier? Why I went into politics?" Adama shook his head. "Because of you," the president said. "You believed in me. You once said, Ibrahim, one day you will lead this country." I laughed then, but I never forgot it. Even when things got hard in military school, even when I was discouraged, I remembered your words. Adama couldn't speak. His throat was tight with emotion. Ibrahim continued, "I owe you more than I can say, and I will not let you suffer any longer." That same day, Ibrahim called his advisors and made a decision. He didn't want Adama to just live in the palace like a charity case. He wanted to give his friend back his dignity. He announced that Adama would become a special advisor on poverty and homelessness. He has lived the life we talk about in meetings, Ibrahim told his team. He knows the pain of hunger, the shame of being ignored, the sadness of being forgotten. He will help us create real change. Some advisors were unsure at first. They were used to working with people in suits, not people from the streets. But Ibrahim stood firm. "This is why we are here," he said. "To serve those who have nothing." The news spread fast. Newspapers, radio stations, and social media were full of stories about the reunion of the president and his childhood friend. Some people were shocked. Others were deeply moved. Videos of their embrace on the street went viral. Many people cried watching it. They said, "This is the kind of leader we need. One who doesn't forget." Across the country, people began to look at beggars differently. They started to ask, what if this man was once a dreamer too? What if he was once a friend, a student, a father, a brother? Adama, now staying in a guest house near the palace, began to speak with government teams. He told them where the homeless slept, how they survived, what kind of help they truly needed. "Most don't want to beg," he said. "They want jobs. They want to feel useful, but no one listens to them." His words were powerful because they came from experience. Slowly, policies began to change. More shelters were opened. Food programs were expanded. Job training centers were launched in poor areas. But for Adama, the most beautiful moment came when he visited their old school with the president. The school was old and damaged, with broken desks and cracked walls. But it was still there. When the students saw the president and his guest, they clapped and cheered. Ibrahim stood in front of them and said, "This man beside me used to sit in this classroom. He was once your age, full of dreams. Life was hard, but he never gave up. Today he stands with me, helping me rebuild our country." The students looked at Adama with respect. Some even cried. That day, Adama realized something important. He had suffered, yes, but now his pain had a purpose. He was using it to help others, and standing beside his old friend. Under the same African sun they once ran beneath as children, he felt proud. Proud not just of Ibrahim, but of himself. The world had tried to break him, but he was still standing, and now he had a voice. A second chance. A new beginning. As President Ibrahim Traoré sat quietly beside Adama in the hospital room, his mind drifted back to the past. The strong leader, known across Africa for his powerful speeches and bold actions, was now simply a man remembering his childhood. His eyes softened as he thought about the days when he and Adama were just two barefoot boys running through their village. Back then, life was hard, but simple. They didn't have toys or fancy clothes. They had the sun, the dust, the open fields, and each other. Every morning they would wake up early and walk miles to get to school. Sometimes they would carry a single notebook between the two of them. They didn't care. They had dreams. They believed that one day they would both rise and change the country they loved. Adama was not just Ibrahim's friend. He was like a brother. Ibrahim still remembered the time when a group of older boys tried to take his lunch. Adama had jumped in front of him and fought them off, even though he was smaller. That day, Adama got a black eye, and the teacher punished him for fighting, but he never complained. That was who he was, loyal, brave, and full of heart. Ibrahim also remembered the nights they spent studying under a lantern with mosquitoes buzzing around. They would take turns reading aloud from an old textbook, dreaming of becoming doctors, teachers, or maybe even leaders. One memory stood out more than any other. It was a hot afternoon after school. The two boys were walking back home when they stopped under a big tree to rest. They were tired and hungry. Adama pulled out a small piece of roasted corn and broke it in half. "Here," he said, giving one half to Ibrahim. "We share everything, remember?" Then Adama looked at him with serious eyes and said, "One day you will be president. But don't forget me, okay?" Ibrahim had laughed. "We'll both be something big, Adama. We'll fix everything that's wrong in this country together." Now sitting beside Adama, many years later, the memory felt like a heavy stone in his heart. He had made it. He'd become president. But Adama had been lost, abandoned by the system, by war, by fate, and he had forgotten him. President Traoré wiped a tear from his eye. "I promised I wouldn't forget," he whispered, "but I did." Adama smiled gently. "Life happened, Ibrahim. We both walked different roads. Yours led to power. Mine led to the street. But we're here now. Maybe that's enough." It wasn't enough for Traoré. The guilt ate at him. How many more Adamas were out there? Children who once had dreams but were crushed by poverty and violence. The thought broke his heart. He remembered the last time he saw Adama before they were separated. It was during the early days of the conflict. Armed men had entered their village. Families were running. The two boys were pulled apart in the chaos. Ibrahim had managed to escape with a group of people going to the city. He looked back for Adama, but he was gone. For years he searched but wore scattered people like leaves in the wind. Eventually he thought Adama might have died. That pain stayed with him, but he buried it as he rose through the military and into politics. Now, seeing his friend alive but suffering was too much. He saw the scars on Adama's hands. He noticed how thin he was. Life on the streets had been cruel. Ibrahim imagined the cold nights, the hunger, the loneliness. All while he lived in safety, attended meetings and gave speeches. What even with all the pain, Adama's heart had not turned bitter. He was still kind, still smiling, still full of dignity. Later that evening, Ibrahim took Adama for a walk in the palace gardens. It was peaceful there. Birds chirped. The sun was setting. "Do you remember when we said we would change this country together?" Ibrahim asked. Adama laughed softly. "Yes, I also remember you said you'd build a big house with mango trees around it." They both laughed. The sound was healing, and Ibrahim said, "I may be president, but I need you. I need your story, your voice, your truth. Together, we can still do what we promised." Adama looked surprised. "You really mean that?" "Of course," Ibrahim said. "You never gave up on me. Now it's my turn not to give up on you." Night, President Traoré wrote a personal letter. In it, he told the story of his childhood, with Adama, the dreams, the friendship, the promise. He ended the letter with a call to action. "Let us not forget those we once laughed with. Let us search for the lost and bring them home." He shared the letter with the nation the next morning. It was published in every newspaper and read on national radio. People across Burkina Faso were moved. Some cried, as others called into radio stations to share their own stories of lost friends and missed promises. The story of Adama became more than just a personal memory. It became a symbol of hope, a symbol of reconnection, a reminder that real leaders remember their roots. And for President Ibrahim Traoré, it was the beginning of a new mission, not just to lead, but to heal. Not just to rule, but to remember. And so, two friends who once ran through dusty fields barefoot, laughing under the African sun, were now walking side by side again this time. Not as boys, but as men determined to keep a promise made long ago under the shade of an old tree. After the emotional reunion with Adama, President Ibrahim Traoré knew that his job was not finished. Finding his childhood friend on the street had shaken him deeply. It was not enough to cry or feel sad. He had to act, had to restore Adama's dignity, not just by giving him food and a place to stay, but by showing the world that every life, no matter how broken, has value. That very night, Ibrahim called his most trusted team members for an emergency meeting. He told them clearly, "I will not leave Adama behind. I want him to live like a human being again, not because I feel pity, but because he deserves it." Some people in the room were shocked. They whispered among themselves, wondering how a homeless man could be brought into the world of leaders and ministers. But President Traoré stood tall. "He is not just any man," he said firmly. "He is a survivor. And his story will help change our country." The first step was to take care of Adama's health. Doctors were brought in to examine him fully. He had infections, untreated wounds, and signs of long-term malnutrition. He was weak, but his spirit was strong. The doctors treated him with care and respect, following the president's orders. Adama was given a comfortable room inside the presidential guest house. Clean clothes, fresh food, and warm blankets were provided. For the first time in years, he slept on a real bed and woke up without fear or hunger. When Adama walked into the dining room of the palace for the first time, he hesitated. The chandeliers, polished floors, and uniformed staff made him feel out of place. But President Traoré welcomed him with a smile. "This is your home now," he said. "Eat freely, sit freely, speak freely." That kindness gave Adama courage. Slowly, he began to trust again. President Traoré didn't stop there. He wanted to give Adama more than just comfort. He wanted to give him a purpose. He called the national press and made a special announcement. "Today," he said, "I introduce to you the newest advisor in my government. A man who has lived through pain, hunger, and homelessness. A man who understands what it means to be invisible in society. He is my friend. His name is Adama, and he will help us build better programs for the poor." The room went silent. Journalists were shocked. Some smiled. Others didn't know how to react. But one thing was clear. This was history in the making. The news spread like wildfire. People couldn't believe it. Homeless man, now an advisor to the president. It sounded like a fairy tale, but it was real. Pictures of Adama wearing a clean suit, sitting beside President Traoré, appeared in newspapers and on television. In one photo, Adama was smiling gently, holding a pen and notepad. He looked different, but his eyes still held the pain of the past. Social media exploded with comments. Some people praised the president's actions. They said, "This is the kind of leadership we need. A president who lifts people up." Others were doubtful. They asked, "What can a street beggar teach a government?" But President Traoré stood firm. "It will teach us the truth," he said. The truth about life on the streets, about hunger, about survival. He knows what we do not. Adama began working with government departments. He visited shelters, spoke with people living in slums, and met with NGOs helping the poor. He listened, took notes, and gave honest feedback. Don't build more shelters far from the city, he told the housing minister. The people won't go there. They feel safer where they can be seen. He also helped create a new training program for homeless people. The plan was simple. Teach them skills like farming, sewing, or carpentry, and help them start small. Businesses. Give them tools, not just food, Adama said. Let them rebuild their lives. Within weeks, change began. The streets around the capital became cleaner as more people were moved into proper housing. Small business programs started in poor areas. Job training centers opened their doors to young people who had dropped out of school. For the first time, many of them felt seen and heard. They looked at Adama as proof that second chances were possible. He visited them often, sat beside them, and told his story. I was you, he said. Hungry, forgotten, hopeless. But now I'm here, and if I can make it, so can you. One of the most touching moments came when Adama was invited to speak at a national youth conference. He stood on the stage, nervous but brave. He looked at the thousands of young faces before him and said, I used to sleep on cold cement floors. People passed by me like I was trash. But one man remembered me. One man gave me back my name, my worth. That man is your president. Crowds stood and clapped. Many had tears in their eyes. President Traoré was watching from the side of the stage. His eyes were wet too. He knew that this was more than just a speech. It was a new beginning for the country. Adama's life had changed, but he remained humble. He never forgot the pain of the streets. He kept one pair of his old torn sandals in his new room as a reminder. These kept me walking when I had nothing, he told the president. Ibrahim nodded. And now, you are helping others walk toward something better? Their bond, once formed in childhood, had grown stronger through pain, separation, and now healing. Together they showed the nation that leadership was not just about power, it was about people, real people. And that even a man who had nothing could rise again. With just one chance, one friend, and one decision to restore his dignity, the moment President Ibrahim Traoré embraced his old friend Adama on the street was seen across the country. Someone in the crowd had recorded it on their phone and posted it online. Within hours, the video went viral. People all over Burkina Faso watched in shock and emotion as their president knelt down and cried beside a homeless man. Many didn't know who the man was, but they were moved by the president's reaction. Soon, the full story was shared that the homeless man was not just anyone, but Adama, President Traoré's childhood friend. They had gone to school together. They'd played together. They'd once dreamed of changing their country together. But while one had become president, the other had ended up alone, begging on the streets. The video touched hearts. It made people cry. But more than anything, it made people think. In the days that followed, the country began to reflect deeply. Newspapers printed editorials about poverty. Talk shows invited guests to discuss homelessness. Children in schools were told the story of the president and Adama as a lesson in kindness and hope. People began to ask important questions. Many Adamas are out there right now, sitting in silence, waiting to be seen. What happened to our sense of community? Why did it take the president himself to notice someone so important? These questions did not go unanswered. Across the nation, people started taking action. In small towns and big cities, groups were formed to support the homeless. Young people organized food drives. Churches and mosques opened their doors wider. Volunteers went out at night with blankets and bread. They didn't wait for the government to act. They were inspired by the president's example and wanted to help in their own way. President Traoré gave a national speech 1 week after the reunion. Standing at the podium, his voice was calm but powerful. That day I found my brother not just in blood but in pain, he said. Adama's story is not unique. He represents thousands who have been forgotten. But now, we must remember them. He called for a new national mission to end extreme poverty and restore dignity to every citizen. He didn't just speak, he gave instructions. He ordered every ministry to provide detailed reports on how they served the poor. He created a task force led by Adama to make sure real change happened, not just promises. The streets began to change. In neighborhoods once filled with despair, hope started to grow. Abandoned buildings were turned into shelters. Markets offered free meals every weekend. Mobile clinics were sent into remote villages. The people were rising. Something even bigger happened. People no longer looked at beggars with disgust. They looked with understanding. They wondered, what if that was my brother, my son, my friend? One businessman who had seen the video said, "I used to ignore the poor, but now I see them as people with stories, people with dreams." He later started a free training center in his town. Adam himself became a symbol of hope. When he visited cities, crowds greeted him with smiles and applause. Children ran to hug him. He was not famous because he was rich or powerful. He was famous because he had survived, and now he was helping others do the same. He spoke with honesty and warmth. "I slept in the rain," he told students. "I ate from trash bins, but someone believed in me. So now I believe in you." His words touched lives, and many who were on the edge of giving up found strength again. One young boy who had lost his father and was about to drop out of school said after hearing Adama speak, "I will not give up. One day, I'll help others too." President Traoré and Adama worked side by side. They visited schools, hospitals, and poor communities together. Wherever they went, people listened. They were a team not of power and pity, but of love and loyalty. Their bond reminded everyone what true friendship meant. It wasn't about status. It wasn't about success. It was about standing by each other, no matter what life brings. The president often said, "I didn't lift Adama. He lifted me. He reminded me why I became a leader." International media began to take notice. News outlets from other countries reported the story. Praised Burkina Faso for its humanity and compassion. One reporter wrote, "In a world full of broken systems, this African nation is healing through heart." Other leaders began to reach out, asking for advice on how to handle poverty with more care and human connection. Ibrahim was now bigger than one country. It was a message to the world. Never forget those who walk beside you when you are nothing. Never ignore those who suffer silently while you rise. As time passed, the story of that street meeting was taught in schools as part of national history. It became a symbol of hope for future generations. Children drew pictures of the president hugging Adama. Poems were written, songs were sung. And in every corner of the country, one lesson remained clear. True leadership is not about wearing a crown. It's about kneeling on the ground, wiping someone's tears and saying, "I remember you." And so, from a simple moment of recognition and compassion, a wave of change spread across an entire nation. A man who once had nothing helped rebuild hope. A leader who never forgot his past helped others see the future. Together, they reminded the world that the smallest act of love can spark the biggest change.